As some of you may know, when the Browns fired John Dorsey, I was beyond livid. I hated the decision. I hated the implications of the decision. I did not think it was a good ideal. And I had some choice words for the front office. And also, you would know if you've been watching that over the course of the draft and free agency, I've gotten much, much more comfortable with the fact that they fired John Dorsey to the point to where I really don't have any lingering anger about that decision. Now, why is that the case? Well, here's why. Now, to understand my frustration about the John Dorsey firing at the time, it wasn't just that they fired him, it was just they fired him on top of the head coach. They got rid of both of them, and it seemed very dysfunctional. It seemed very unstable. It definitely didn't feel like the building was aligned at the time, and it definitely did not feel competent. And those are the four things that I wanted for the organization after the 2019 season. I mean, we saw the mess that it was because the organization wasn't aligned. I wanted something that was going to feel more aligned than what we had. We saw the mess that happened because the coaching wasn't competent. So I wanted something that felt more competent. And then also we saw the mess that happened organizationally because this wasn't a stable situation to begin with, and it was not functional. And a lot of that blame for those four things being wrong went on Freddie Kitchens. And I think a lot of that is justified. Some of it isn't, but I think there is a good amount that is justified. And I thought that John Dorsey had a good enough track record that you should be able to trust him to be able to build these things once things kind of clear up after the mistake of hiring Freddie Kitchens in 2018. And again, I hear people ever since John Dorsey left Cleveland all of a sudden trash John Dorsey as if he was never a good GM, and that's just not true. John Dorsey is and will continue to be somewhere a good GM eventually. I mean, I understand that John Dorsey has his blind spots. I point out his blind spots all the time, but he also has a history of being able to adequately over time address those blind spots. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, the defense is a little wonky. He didn't really do much there, but he at least did something on the lines, which were the big issue on both sides of the team. And then speaking of what he did in Kansas City, John Dorsey really has a can't-miss quarterback track record. You go back to his days in Green Bay when he was the director of college scouting, when they drafted Aaron Rodgers. He had to have a big part in that. He was the GM that traded for Alex Smith. He had to have a big part in that. And I don't care what these people, the conspiracy theories coming out of Kansas City tell you, John Dorsey was the GM when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. John Dorsey is completely a big part of the reason why Kansas City has Patrick Mahomes. Don't believe this lie that the assistant GM had more say in that decision than John Dorsey. Does that make sense? Does that pass the smell test? It doesn't. And then in 2018, he drafted Baker Mayfield, who that year broke the rookie touchdown record and seems very promising. So you got Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers, and Baker Mayfield. Those are all starting quarterbacks in the NFL at the very least. Alex Smith is very underrated in his time in Kansas City, in my opinion. And then you got two guys who might end up in the conversation for greatest quarterback of all time. That's not Tom Brady, with Patrick Mahomes having the chance to challenge for the latter. So he has a great track record when it comes to quarterback. So he's going to be back in NFL. He's going to make more good decisions. And he is a good GM. So that's why I was upset when they fired him, because John Dorsey is objectively a good GM. And it felt like they were just going to tear everything down and just continue to dysfunction and just completely blow this window that the Browns were in. Again, all I wanted to start the season was something stable, something functional, something aligned, and something competent. And it felt like with this move, none of those things were going to happen. And I think justifiably so. I mean, it was not a completely applauded move at the time. That's what I felt at the time, and that's what a lot of Browns fans felt at the time. And honestly, when you're left as your hope to trust Jimmy Haslam, it's not a good situation to be optimistic in, because Jimmy Haslam has not showed the ability to take a back seat when there is significant hype surrounding a player or a coach. He always falls for the hype. It's been Jimmy Haslam's biggest problem, is he's always fallen for the damn hype. And that brings me to why I'm fine with what the Browns are doing now. If you talk about something stable, this has all the makings of something that's more stable than the past regime. It's a credit to the current regime, and I don't want to give them too much credit, but they do deserve credit for this. It's a credit for them that is dysfunctional as this entire thing started, how this became to be the situation that we're in. It is amazing how uneventful things are with the Cleveland Browns. There's no power struggles, there's no news, there's no finger pointing, subtweets, random reports coming out of unnamed sources. It's been completely uneventful. It almost doesn't even feel like they changed the coach and GM at all this offseason with how uneventful and quiet things have been for the last few months. This is a pleasant surprise. This has been more stable than I anticipated things to be when they fired John Dorsey. Also, it was a huge deal that in the hiring process, they did not hire Josh McDaniels. Now, your thoughts or opinions about Josh McDaniels aside, this is more about Jimmy Haslam. Again, as I said earlier, he falls victim to hype countless times. You look at Ray Farmer, was a hyped up candidate, thought to be in NFL circles as one of the best young GM candidates. Jimmy fell for the hype. Jimmy hired him. Didn't work out. Then he fired Robert Jasinski so he could move for a more flashy coach, reportedly Josh McDaniels, because that's what he wanted. He wanted somebody more hyped. And he missed on all of them, had to hire Mike Pettin, and then fired Mike Pettin after 2 years. Hugh Jackson, it might seem funny now because he's literally one of the worst coaches of all time. But at the time, Hugh Jackson had a ton of hype around him. He had a MVP candidate, Andy Dalton, in his last year in Cincinnati. There was a ton of hype surrounding Hugh, and that's ultimately why Jimmy Haslam decided to take Hugh over Sean McDermott, who didn't have a lot of hype surrounding his name. Same thing with Freddie Kitchens, why he okayed that, because Freddie had that buzz from how the Browns ended the season the year before. You go back to some player personnel decisions. Johnny Football, completely Jimmy Haslam hype decision. You can argue RG3 is even a part of that because he still had some hype left after he left Washington as a reclamation project. Not the same thing, but on a similar vibe. The significance of this is that for the first time since Jimmy has owned this team, there is tangible evidence that he decided to take a real step back in this process and let some of the people he hired, for better or worse, to make football decisions, Paul DePodesta was clearly the person that he hired to make these decisions. He was right on Sean McDermott in 2015. So we'll see if he's right about Kevin Stefanski. I don't think any of us have enough information to definitively know if this is going to work or not. But the moral of the story there is that Jimmy Haslam did not fall for the hype. He did not push heaven and earth out the way to give Josh McDaniels everything he ever dreamed of. And something tells me 3-4 years ago, he would have most certainly have done that, especially without the burden of having already had a GM at the time. He would have most certainly done it. The fact that he didn't fall for the hype means that he's finally letting his own bad instincts, quite frankly, get out of the way so the Browns can have more organizationally sound decision-making. This is huge. When you talk about something stable, that is the biggest part of it. Jimmy Haslam getting a little bit out the way. Now, when you talk about something functional, right? That's what I wanted. I wanted something functional. This hire and this string of hires scream functional. It's almost screaming synergy, because all these guys from the bottom up have not the same, but compatible backgrounds and compatible philosophies. Hugh Jackson and Sachi Brown, completely different backgrounds and incompatible ideologies. They were never going to work with each other. Paul DePodesta, John Dorsey were hired to do the same job, did not have the same background, did not have compatible ideologies. It did not work. Those two pieces did not fit. One of them had to go. I thought John Dorsey shouldn't have been the one. I thought he should have stayed, and Paul should have went, but they went the other way with it. But nonetheless, Paul has had the ability to hire a more streamlined organization that is compatible with each other. You have Andrew Berry, who's very much a football guy, right? He played football at Harvard. He's been a scout in the NFL since 2009. Yes, he has that Ivy League education, so everybody wants to act like he's a suit that's been in the office and doesn't know much about football, similar to Paul DePodesta, because Paul DePodesta is more of a suit in that way. But Andrew Berry's a football lifer. I mean, this is somebody who has spent all of his professional career in football in one shape or form, and specifically in the NFL. He's not a newcomer to the dynamics of an NFL locker room or an NFL organization. Andrew Berry is a football lifer. Then you have Kevin Stefanski, who is a very similar deal, a former college player at Penn who has worked his way up from a positional coach in 2006. Again, yes, he's an Ivy Leaguer. Yes, he's going to be tagged as his analytics guy, but he's as much as a football lifer as Freddie Kitchens was at this point in his career. He has spent his entire career as a position coach and as a coordinator in those locker rooms. Again, he is not the concept of a locker room is not foreign to him, and it's not foreign to Andrew Berry. It's very different than when they put Sachi Brown in there, who was a front office Browns business side guy that they made the football GM. These are two different situations. Both of these guys are football lifers, and if they didn't go to an Ivy League school, quite frankly, they wouldn't be tagged as analytics guys. It would be tagged as regular old football people. But since they, went to Ivy League schools, have these backgrounds, people want to act like they're not football lifers in this way. And it just seems like a very functional pairing from the top bottom. Paul DePodesta has the guy he wants. Andrew Berry has a guy that he likes. They both can get along up and down the chain. Nobody's reporting to Jimmy Haslam because they don't like the ideal of this and getting swayed, and then Jimmy's meddling in. It's just one straight line up and down. And the Browns organization needed that, something aligned. I've talked about this a lot, so I'm going to be brief here, but this is all aligned. Again, top bottom. Analytics guy, Paul DePodesta, with the Ivy League background, got the guy that he wanted as his coach, Kevin Stefanski, and got the guy that he wanted that has some experience in the Browns organization with Andrew Berry. There's no huge philosophical differences and incompatibilities with any of these guys. It's all compatible. It all works out. And then the thing I was really worried about, because John Dorsey is not just competent, he's good. And I was worried that they were going to bring somebody in here and do something stupid and get a guy so they can get a coach. And they were going to hire somebody who was incompatible and also not competent, right? Because that would be one of the worst things that could happen. But this front office has been competent. Look at the signings and free agency. Seems right. Seems competent. No Mitchell Schwartz stories where they're putting contracts on the table and pulling them last second. Like, none of these incompetent stories that you're hearing coming out of the team. And they drafted pretty well on the surface. We have to wait some years to see how these signings in the draft work out. But on the surface, as of right now, everything seems fine. So now I'm at the point to where the four things that I wanted and the four things I thought weren't going to happen because they fired him are happening. So why should I ignore that and be negative towards Andrew Berry and company because he's not John Dorsey? I mean, the fact of the matter is the job is what the job needs to be. And if the job's getting done, why am I complaining about who's doing the job? It really doesn't matter at that point as long as it gets done now. Will they regret firing John Dorsey in the long term? Would John Dorsey's vision of unilateral kind of alignment be better than Paul DePodesta? That's up to debate. That's not definitive yet. But what I wanted, I'm getting, quite frankly, with them. So it's hard for me to be upset about the decision to fire him because they didn't trade a bunch of people. They didn't hire a bunch of buffoons. Jimmy Haslam didn't go and move heaven and earth for Josh McDaniels. He actually took the step back. So I have to say at this point of the offseason, I'm pleasantly surprised. Now, my mind can be completely changed by that by the time we start camp, because they could have done some dysfunctional stuff at that point. But as of right now, as of May 26th, I feel good about what this team's doing. I feel good about the front office. I feel good about the message from the coaching staff. I feel good about the energy I'm feeling from the team. I think good things are coming. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think it's right of me to have changed my mind about John Dorsey? And have you personally changed your mind about the John Dorsey firing? Do you think it was good, bad, or are you still on the fence about it? Let me know down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day and have a good night.